Truth is like air. You are around it all the time, but when you try to grab at it, there's actually nothing to grab. So it's an extremely hard video to make, and it's one I want to remake every couple of years as I progress, but one I believe is a struggle for teachers to communicate. Today we'll cover the ultimate truths possible for humans to grasp. This will be the foundation we will rebuild our thought structure on, and this video will be referenced repeatedly and be a core teaching of mine. Truth is defined by the Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary as true facts about something rather than things that have been invented or guessed. A fact is described as a thing that is known to be true, especially when it can be proved. To make things clear here, we run into limits with language when discussing truth, so while it is possible to experience truth, which means it would then be true to you, based on the dictionary definition, as then that experience wouldn't have been invented or guessed, proving it isn't necessarily possible through language or experiments, which is what makes it such a struggle for teachers of this content. If you've ever done a psychedelic drug, for example, and then tried to explain it to someone that hasn't done it, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Other examples would be, suppose you'd just gone skydiving or travelled the world. Then you go to speak to someone who has never travelled or skydived. They tell you they've seen people doing that on YouTube, and you try to explain to them what they are missing, but they can't grasp it because there are limitations to language. We'll start with more possible to experience truths. Then as we progress, they'll get more and more hard to explain, let alone prove, but ultimately they are true and you can validate these for yourself over time. The first truth, I exist. This one is easy to validate within yourself, but still a little difficult to convince others of, because only their belief makes it possible to confirm your existence. They cannot do so experientially. Because we are experiencing something right now, we can say there is a quality of aliveness in us, of existing. When I say I exist, I'm talking about a quality of ourselves that is beyond the thought I, beyond the thought I that compares itself to me and has a name and label of a job, etc. If you just sit here, you can see shapes, colors, etc. When you dream, you still can have a sense of existing. Now, suppose there was a situation where there was no such quality of a sense of existing. A famous quote that links in well here is, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? And the answer is, there is no tree or sound. If your bubble of experience or consciousness, whatever you want to call it, isn't around, there is no you that can verify it. So the only way it exists is in your mind as a thought. That scenario can never happen and be given a quality of truth, as what a tree and sound represent as words are not happening in the actual state within the bubble being experienced. Another angle of this is to look at what it means to not exist. My claim is it is impossible for you not to exist, because if you didn't exist, nothing would exist. Not even nothing, because this is where language trips us up. Because even to say nothing exists implies there is something called nothing that exists. I've heard before people assume that it's a total blankness, that nothing existing would be like floating in darkness, a sea of black. But even that implies that something is existing, that is aware it is floating in a sea of black. If you find a way where the bubble of existence doesn't exist, it is a thought pattern and not truth, because you looked at truth directly without thought overlaying its language patterns on top of it. It'd be clear to you that this is all there is and all there ever was, and that having a thought arise that there can be nothingness is different from the actuality of that fact. The next truth is going to stretch the mind further and be another level more difficult to experience as truth without deep contemplation. So I encourage you to contemplate these next truths deeply. Truth number 2, everything is now. There is no past or future. Have you ever experienced past or future? Could you ever prove to yourself in this moment that past happened and future was coming? You'll find you can't. And although paradoxically I talk about exploring the mind, which is completely based in the past and future, never in the now, it makes complete sense, although it is also a paradox. So let's first describe now, and then we'll explain past and future more in depth to see it clearer. Look around, you'll notice that there's a moment here. That in this moment you may have a watch on and the clock ticks. 11:43, 11:44, 45, and so on. As you watch the time ticking, can you simultaneously see how the moment never changes? Each second happens right now. When you go for a walk, the now you left in and the now you arrive in is always the same. There is something extremely profound happening here, but also extremely subtle. Now, in this moment, I think it's fair to say most people will say the past is true. However, if you bring up the past, you'll notice it only ever arises as a thought or an image. There has been some level of emotional charge within a now moment, and the mind has snapped that moment and allows for it to be brought up as a thought or image in real time. But that doesn't mean that there is ever anything other than the now. And when you bring up the past or think on the future, that all happens in the now. So when we see what is true, only what is happening right now is 100% true. Past and future may or may not be true from your perspective. And in fact, I know for sure it is possible to see through thought so clearly that past and future do not exist at all. How many times have you recalled the past and someone has said, "That's not how it happened," or "I don't think you felt that way in that moment"? Have you ever thought about an ex-partner and started to miss them, forgetting that in the moment when you had all the information, you felt differently? Perhaps ended a relationship, but now you look back on the relationship with rose-colored glasses and you start to miss the person because you only remember the good. So even the past you do remember, you can't trust because of the thought structures, biases for things like avoiding pain and chasing pleasure, just to name a few of the biases and traps we have in our mind. So I'm not saying that past happened or did not happen. The truth is, I don't know if it really happened or not. I assume it did in some capacity, and that's the truest answer I can currently give. But what I am sure of is that if it did happen, it happened in the now, and that the more time I can spend in the truth of this now moment, rather than overlaying a potentially true, however immensely biased past, the better my experience will be now. To expand on this slightly further and attack it from another angle, if you like, memory is part of this bubble of experience, but memory 99% of the time does not equal truth. We often look back on things and use our current state to evaluate the past, giving a totally different understanding. We forget things. We forget the biases, habits, thought patterns, plus the other person involved in whatever the past event is. We forget they are a person with bias, habits, patterns, and thought patterns, etc. that change over time. We don't take all that into consideration so much, yet we say past is truth. This is why so many spiritual teachers discuss living in the now so often, because in the now everything is clear, and well, depending on your development, let's say it's clearer, at least. We have as much information as possible. Yes, we have our biases and habits and thought patterns, etc. And hopefully we are working to dissolve those so we can see the now as raw and truthful as possible. But this is the most up-to-date we can be, and the person in front of us can be. Have you ever looked at someone you knew 5 years ago in disgust? A thought arose of the person they used to be, and you spoke to them with that same bias, assuming they were the same now. You didn't truly see them. Maybe they are the same, and that's fine. But you're going to have that experience of interaction with them regardless of the past if you bump into someone. So why not be as neutral as possible and see them as truthfully as they show up right now? Maybe they had a bad day when they did the thing that hurt you, or maybe they had a loss in the family and they were lashing out at people. There are so many different reasons. And yes, a thought structure can be overall bad, but they can also be overall good but have bad moments. And if our goal is to become as conscious and live a life of peace and clarity in as many moments as possible, seeing the now without past and future is the way to make that happen. So in summary for this point, at the highest level, everything is now. Even past and future happen in this now moment and arise as thoughts and images. It can feel like there is a past and future because we project ourselves there by placing attention on the thought of the image, but this is illusion. Memory producing language or images masquerading as truth. Lastly, I want to be clear on how time fits in with this. Time within the now is happening. We need time to meet someone for lunch, for example. However, time is secondary to the now. First comes now, which we exist in eternally. At least that is the truth I can verify. Then comes an infinite possibility of things that happen within this moment. For us, we live on an earth which rotates around the world. We create time and days, weeks, years based on this revolving around the sun and how our society agrees time should be, how our bodies react to our environment, etc. However, this is not truth in the sense that it is constant for all of reality. If we wake up tomorrow and for some reason Earth has been knocked by an asteroid, time would look very different, regardless of if we looked at our watch and saw the seconds ticking. The time wouldn't align with how often the sun faced the part of the Earth you are on. The amount of time it took to get around the sun will be less than our current year, so a calendar year would look different, etc. Truth number 3, everything is one. Once you see now without thoughts running in the mind, which is essentially ego death, it then becomes easy to see everything as one. The mind with its beliefs, habits, patterns, biases, perspectives, etc. create reality. There is no line between your body and the external world. Yes, the experience within the now moment is we have a body that senses touch and we feel, giving an illusion of separation. But if you can imagine looking at your bubble of experience without the layers of your mind projecting onto it and making sense of it, you'd see it was all you. There's even plenty of science to support that what we see, smell, hear all comes from within us. What the scientist does not realize is there is no difference between the two. Science is just explaining truth in a way that is satisfying to the existing collective thought structures. I'll do a deeper look at this in the future, but right now, if you've got the sense for this now moment, and you've been able to slightly question thought as a truth, can you see that your family and friends only exist in your mind right now? And if they are in the same room as you, they are only your friend or family or partner because of the attachment you've built through language and images of the past, which keep you tied to them in a deeper way than your old maths teacher, for example. It's all you with a capital Y, which means not you as is commonly described, which would be the thought that arises, you. We give labels to everything and we see the world as the labels and what those labels have come to mean to us, which then closes us off to the actual truth in front of us. The truth is everything is within the now that has been with you every moment, like a video game that renders the area of the game you are in and nothing else. That is what reality is. Anything outside of now doesn't exist unless you have a thought which arises that says it does. I know even as I say all this that I'm not doing these truths justice, because your mind will be thinking so many things, trying to make sense of it, and no language can explain something like that. Just as no language can explain the feeling of falling through the sky after jumping out of a plane. You need to experience it, have an insight which comes from dissolving the mind, whether that be with years of journaling, meditation, or on a psychedelic. Truth 4. Everything changes except the first 3 truths. Let's do a bit of a review here, explaining this one. Knowing you exist, we've already discussed why it can't be any other way. Within that, we discovered that the knowing exists in a now state, which we explained also never changes, and that time is an illusion. We never go into the past or future. Only a thought arises in the now that we place attention on and gives us the illusion of leaving the now. This leads to seeing that the now is a timeless state. Everything that happens within it is separated only by thought, but there are not actual boundaries between anything other than the ones we create. Even when we say there are other conscious humans, this is true to the extent that our minds believe it is the case. So hopefully it's clear and we can see how all those truths don't change. The final truth, everything else changes. It doesn't matter where in reality you go now. If you go to heaven or hell, into a dream state, or to some sort of astral realm, if you start a new life when you die or go into total blackness, whatever happens within this bubble of now keeps the same truths and everything else is subject to change. With this information, we can now base our psychology and philosophy in some sort of grounded place and have a position to work from. There may or may not be any more guaranteed 100% truths, but we can start now creating a framework on top of this foundation using highly logical explanations that can explain highly possible truths, at least relative to humans. For example, a future video will be all is love. I'm extremely tempted to put it here as 100% truth, but the fact that love is so misinterpreted, I felt I couldn't know 100% if this is true, at least at my current level of consciousness, due to the fact from our human perspective, there is clearly good and bad. So even though I believe from the highest levels of consciousness, it's all love, and I can logically explain it, I haven't integrated that and verified it's 100% true, so I don't want to claim it. Another is what your thought structure is gets mirrored onto reality, and you experience life based on your thought structure, and very little to do with how external reality actually is in this now moment. Again, I can logically explain it, but it's not completely integrated. So these 4 truths are truths I've verified for myself, and you can verify for yourself. I'll have future videos going into more depth on the specific truths and the best ways to get to them. They'll generally be journaling, meditation, counseling, coaching, and psychedelics, so keep that in mind for now. There aren't really any other ways that can unlock the mind apart from that I know of, and I recommend a combination of them all. Although be very careful with psychedelics. I'll have a dedicated video on those in the future, and you should follow the laws in your area and doctor's advice. Lastly, you might be asking, what's in it for me? To know all this or work on uncovering these deep truths for myself. All I can tell you is what it has done for me, and that is it's given me a satisfactory foundation to build on. Because if you build beliefs, habits, and take action on top a foundation that is a false thought structure, you can veer wildly off course. For example, if you follow a religion and call that book the truth of reality and read it with all your biases, perspectives, fears, judgments, etc., what you build on top of that, even if you are meticulously careful, will have so much untruth in it and be so far away from the truth of what you experience moment to moment, life will be very confusing for you. Whereas if you ground your truth in the now and the other truths we've discussed, when you build beliefs or new perspectives, you'll quickly see if they aren't aligned with the now and be able to revert back and deeper explore the new belief or perspective to see where you've gone wrong and why it's not aligning with the truth of now. In the following of a religious ideology, for example, you don't have that same truth of what's happening now to guide you. You can just make up more and more thoughts and images to explain the original truth, which is actually false, or you don't fully understand it as it was meant, and therefore you are led away and your reality doesn't align with your worldview, and everything is very confusing, which is what 99% of the planet are doing. All right, give me some ideas on what you'd like to see explored in the future. Also, if you have any questions on the worldview I'm presenting, take what you want from my worldview and leave the rest, obviously. Most importantly, verify for yourself. Don't build this into your thought structure without actually having the moments of clarity yourself, as that is another trap of this path. Please share with others to get this information out there. Like the video and hit that subscribe button if you've gained some new knowledge today and if you want to see more going forward.